The fluorescent lights above my desk buzzed incessantly, casting harsh shadows across the resignation letter I'd just finished typing. My fingers trembled as I reached for the print button. 3 years of dedication and sleepless nights reduced to a single page of corporate formalities. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was drafting my own professional death warrant on the very computer where I'd created the revolutionary marketing algorithms that would soon make someone else famous. "Maya, you're still here?" The voice belonged to Jessica, my former colleague who now avoided eye contact whenever we passed in the hallway. She clutched a stack of files that looked suspiciously like the projects I'd been working on before everything fell apart. Her discomfort was palpable, the kind that comes from witnessing someone's downfall while secretly relieved it wasn't your own. I glanced at the clock, its red digits mocking me with the late hour. "Just finishing up some loose ends," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. The building had emptied hours ago, leaving only the night security guards and the ghost of my former ambitions haunting these sterile corridors. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sparkled below like scattered diamonds, each light representing dreams and opportunities that now felt impossibly distant. The elevator ride to the parking garage felt eternal, each floor marking another step away from the life I'd built. When the doors finally opened, I was greeted by the familiar sight of my beaten-up Honda Civic, parked next to Alex's gleaming BMW. Even in the dim fluorescent lighting of the underground barrage, his car seemed to mock me with its pristine condition, a stark reminder of the professional disparity that had always existed between us. Alex Rodriguez had been my boyfriend for 2 years, a relationship that began when he was just another ambitious account manager and I was the rising star in the analytics department. Back then, he'd been charming in his pursuit, bringing me coffee during late-night work sessions and listening intently as I explained the intricacies of consumer behavior patterns. Those conversations had been the foundation of our relationship, built on what I believed was mutual respect and shared professional passion. The drive home through the empty streets gave me too much time to think, to replay the events that had led to this moment. 3 months ago, I'd presented my breakthrough algorithm to the executive board, a complex system that could predict consumer purchasing patterns with unprecedented accuracy. The presentation had gone flawlessly, with CEO Jonathan Westfield himself praising the innovation and promising a promotion that would finally give me the recognition I deserved. 2 weeks later, Alex introduced me to Sophia Chen, his new colleague from the business development team. She was everything I wasn't: polished, connected, and blessed with the kind of effortless confidence that came from never having to fight for anything. Her handshake had been firm but cold, her smile perfectly practiced, and her eyes calculating as they assessed me like a potential threat to be neutralized. The signs had been there, subtle at first but growing bolder with each passing day. Alex's phone buzzing with increasingly frequent messages, his sudden interest in working late, the way he'd grown distant during our conversations about work. I'd attributed it to the stress of the upcoming promotion announcements, convinced that once the dust settled, we'd find our way back to each other. My apartment felt cavernous when I finally walked through the door, the silence pressing against me like a physical weight. The Chinese takeout containers from 3 nights ago still sat on the coffee table, a testament to my recent inability to maintain even basic routines. I collapsed onto the couch, still wearing my work clothes, and stared at the ceiling where a water stain had formed the shape of what looked like a question mark. The call came at midnight, Alex's name lighting up my phone screen with an almost aggressive brightness. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity and the remnants of what I'd once thought was love compelled me to answer. "Maya, we need to talk." His voice carried none of its usual warmth, replaced instead with the clinical tone he used during difficult client negotiations. In the background, I could hear the faint sound of laughter and clinking glasses, the soundtrack of celebration that should have included me. "It's midnight, Alex. Can't this wait until tomorrow?" I already knew it couldn't, but whatever he was calling to tell me would shatter what little remained of my carefully constructed world. The promotion went to Sophia. The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs and leaving me gasping in the darkness of my living room. She presented some really innovative ideas about consumer analytics, and the board was impressed. The cruel irony of his words settled over me like a shroud. Those innovative ideas had been mine, shared during countless intimate conversations when I'd trusted him with my professional insights and future plans. The algorithm that had taken me months to develop, the market research that had consumed my weekends, the strategic vision that had kept me awake at night, all of it had been repackaged and presented by someone who'd known me less than 3 months. "My ideas," I whispered, the words barely audible even to myself. "Those were my ideas, Alex." His silence stretched between us like a chasm, filled with the weight of betrayal and broken promises. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a defensive edge that I'd never heard before. "Look, Maya, these things happen in business. Ideas evolve, people collaborate. You can't claim ownership over concepts that develop organically through team discussions." The gaslighting was masterful in its simplicity, designed to make me question my own memories and doubt the validity of my anger. But I remembered every late-night conversation, every detailed explanation I'd given him about market segmentation and predictive modeling. I remembered the way his eyes had lit up when I'd walked him through the algorithm's potential applications, the questions he'd asked that had seemed driven by genuine curiosity rather than calculated theft. "And us?" The question escaped before I could stop it, though I already knew the answer from the celebration sounds still audible in the background. "That's complicated, Maya. Sophia and we just clicked professionally, and then things developed naturally. You have to understand, this isn't personal. It's just business." The line went dead, leaving me alone with the crushing weight of complete betrayal. In less than 5 minutes, I'd lost both my career trajectory and my relationship, twin pillars that had supported my identity and self-worth crumbling simultaneously. The apartment felt smaller now, the walls closing in as the reality of my situation settled over me like a suffocating blanket. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind racing through memories and possibilities, anger and humiliation taking turns as the dominant emotion. I replayed conversations, searching for signs I'd missed, red flags I'd ignored in my naive belief that love and professional respect could coexist. By dawn, I'd reached a decision that felt both inevitable and terrifying. I would resign with dignity intact, even if it meant starting over from nothing. The morning sun painted my apartment in soft gold tones, a beautiful irony given the darkness that had settled over my life. I showered and dressed with mechanical precision, choosing my most professional outfit as armor against the judgment and pity I was sure to encounter. The resignation letter sat in my printer tray like a loaded weapon, ready to end this chapter of my life with whatever grace I could muster. The office buzzed with excitement when I arrived, the kind of electric energy that accompanies major announcements and organizational changes. Clusters of employees huddled near coffee stations and in conference rooms, their conversations punctuated by glances toward the executive floor where the real decisions were made. I navigated through the maze of cubicles with purposeful determination, ignoring the curious looks and whispered speculations that followed in my wake. Sophia's new office was being prepared when I passed the executive hallway, maintenance staff installing her nameplate with efficient professionalism. Through the glass partition, I could see her inside, surveying her new domain with the satisfaction of someone who'd successfully executed a complex plan. She looked up as I passed, our eyes meeting for a brief moment that contained volumes of unspoken understanding. Her smile was neither apologetic nor triumphant, simply the acknowledgement of one player by another in a game where only one could win. Jonathan Westfield's assistant looked surprised when I appeared at her desk with my resignation letter, her carefully maintained composure slipping for just a moment before professional training reasserted itself. "Mr. Westfield is in meetings all morning, Maya. Perhaps you could schedule something for this afternoon?" "This can't wait," I replied, placing the letter on her desk with finality that brooked no argument. Please see that he gets this immediately." The elevator ride back to my floor felt different now, charged with the electricity of bridges burning and futures reshaping themselves. My colleagues continued their work with the same dedication I'd once shown, unaware that one of their own was already mentally packing her belongings and preparing for exile. The next few hours passed in a blur of teen. Administrative tasks and farewell conversations that felt both necessary and surreal. HR processed my resignation with efficient professionalism. Their questions about my reasons met with carefully neutral responses about pursuing new opportunities. The exit interview was a masterclass in corporate diplomacy, my feedback sanitized to protect bridges I might someday need to cross again. By noon, I was walking toward the parking garage for the last time. My personal belongings in a single cardboard box that seemed inadequate to contain 3 years of professional growth and accumulated dreams. The security guard who checked my badge gave me a sympathetic nod, his expression suggesting he'd witnessed this ritual countless times before. The drive home felt different in daylight. The familiar streets transformed by the knowledge that I was no longer bound to any particular destination or schedule. For the first time in months, my phone wasn't buzzing with urgent emails or last-minute meeting requests. The silence should have been liberating, but instead, it felt ominous. Like the calm before a storm that would reshape the landscape of my entire existence. My apartment welcomed me back with the same indifferent silence it had offered the night before. But now, the space felt pregnant with possibility, rather than merely empty. I set the box of personal items on the coffee table, surveyed the domain that would serve as headquarters for whatever came next. The water stain on the ceiling still looked like a question mark, but now it seemed to be asking different questions, ones about resilience and reinvention rather than simply survival. The following weeks blurred together in a haze of job applications, networking events, and the crushing routine of professional rejection. My savings dwindled with each passing day, the numbers in my checking account serving as a countdown timer to financial disaster. The few interview opportunities that materialized inevitably led nowhere. My former colleagues' references either unavailable or diplomatically neutral in ways that spoke volumes about the industry's perception of my situation. Social media became a torture device of its own design. Alex and Sophia's professional updates serving as constant reminders of opportunities that should have been mine. Their joint presentation at the industry conference had been a particular knife twist. My algorithm rebranded and presented as their collaborative innovation. The standing ovation they received should have been mine. The accolades and networking opportunities flowing to them like water finding its natural course. Depression crept in slowly, disguised as rational acceptance of my circumstances before revealing its true nature through increasingly frequent days spent in bed, paralyzed by the weight of failure and betrayal. The apartment that had once felt full of possibility now seemed to mock me with its emptiness, every surface a reminder of dreams deferred and ambitions crushed. It was during one of these dark periods, 3 months after my resignation, that I received an unexpected phone call that would change everything. The number was unfamiliar, the voice on the other end crisp and professional in a way that immediately commanded attention. Maya Chen? This is Victoria Sterling from Sterling Associates Executive Search. I have an opportunity that might interest you, but it would require absolute discretion and a willingness to think outside conventional corporate structures. The job offer was unlike anything I'd encountered in my professional career, a consulting position with a startup that existed more as concept than concrete entity. The salary was modest but sufficient. The benefits package unconventional but intriguing. What caught my attention wasn't the compensation, but the nature of the work itself. Developing predictive analytics for emerging markets, exactly the kind of cutting-edge application I'd dreamed of pursuing. The interview took place in a coffee shop downtown. Victoria Sterling proving to be a woman whose reputation preceded her in the best possible way. Her silver hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon, her dark eyes sharp with intelligence and something that might have been mischief. She ordered black coffee and got straight to business with an efficiency that I found refreshing after months of corporate doublespeak. "Your former employer made a significant mistake in letting you go," she said without preamble, her statement carrying the weight of insider knowledge that immediately put me on alert. "The algorithm you developed has potential applications they haven't even begun to explore, and the way they acquired it raises serious questions about their business ethics." The conversation that followed was unlike any job interview I'd experienced, feeling more like a strategic planning session between equals than a traditional employer-candidate dynamic. Victoria outlined the startup's vision with passionate precision, describing market opportunities and technological innovations that aligned perfectly with my professional interests and expertise. "The position comes with equity," she mentioned casually, as if discussing the weather rather than potentially life-changing financial arrangements. "If the company succeeds, your ownership stake could prove quite valuable. Of course, if it fails, you'll have gained experience in entrepreneurial ventures that many employers value highly." I accepted the position that afternoon, signing contracts that felt like declarations of independence rather than employment agreements. The work would begin immediately, with flexible hours and remote options that felt revolutionary after years of corporate rigidity. For the first time in months, I felt the stirring of something that might eventually become hope. The startup's office occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse in the Arts District, its exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows creating an atmosphere of creative possibility that felt like coming home. My new colleagues were an eclectic mix of former corporate refugees and serial entrepreneurs, their energy infectious and their commitment to innovation absolute. Dr. Marcus Kim, the Chief Technology Officer, became my closest collaborator almost immediately. His background in behavioral psychology complemented my analytical skills perfectly, our conversations flowing with the easy rhythm of intellectual equals exploring uncharted territory. Unlike my previous workplace, competition here was directed outward toward market challenges rather than inward toward colleague destruction. The work itself was exhilarating, combining theoretical research with practical applications in ways that made every day feel like a puzzle waiting to be solved. We were developing something entirely new, a comprehensive platform that could predict consumer behavior across multiple industries simultaneously. The complexity was staggering, but so was the potential impact if we succeeded. Months passed in a blur of Doppler, late-night coding sessions, weekend brainstorming marathons, and the gradual emergence of something truly revolutionary. The algorithm I'd originally developed was just the foundation, quote. What we were building now was a skyscraper of analytical capability that could transform how businesses understood their customers. It was during Canteen Y, one of these intense work periods, that I discovered the true nature of our startup's backing. Victoria Sterling wasn't just our executive recruiter. She was the venture capital partner who'd provided our initial funding. More importantly, she was also the former business partner of Jonathan Westfield, my old CEO. Their relationship having ended acrimoniously several years before I joined his company. Personal vendettas make poor business strategies, she told me when I confronted her about the connection, her smile suggesting she didn't entirely believe her own words. However, market disruption often requires understanding the weaknesses of established players, and few people understand Jonathan's blind spots better than I do. The revelation should have troubled me, but instead, it felt like pieces of a complex puzzle finally clicking into place. My termination hadn't been random or purely personal. It had been part of a larger corporate chess game, where I'd been both pawn and potential queen, depending on which side of the board I chose to occupy. He made a critical error in letting you go, Victoria continued, her tone suggesting she'd given this considerable thought. Your algorithm was the foundation for everything they're building now, but they don't understand its true potential because they acquired it through theft rather than development. We, however, understand exactly what we're working with. The months that followed were a masterclass in strategic business development. Our small team working with focused intensity toward a launch that would either establish us as industry leaders or consume our resources entirely. The pressure was immense but exhilarating. every breakthrough bringing us closer to a goal that had seemed impossible just a year before. Our beta testing phase exceeded every projection, early clients reporting accuracy rates that seemed almost supernatural in their precision. Word began spreading through industry networks, generating interest from exactly the kind of high-profile clients that established companies fought to retain. We were no longer just building a product, we were creating a platform that could reshape entire industries. It was during this period of rapid growth that I learned about the financial difficulties plaguing my former company. Alex and Sophia's implementation of my stolen algorithm had been technically competent but strategically flawed, their lack of foundational understanding leading to costly errors and client dissatisfaction. The promotion that had once seemed like the end of my world was proving to be the beginning of their professional downfall. The irony was delicious but not entirely satisfying. I'd moved beyond simple revenge into something more complex and ultimately more rewarding. Success, I was learning, was a far more elegant form of vindication than any direct retaliation could provide. Our official launch was scheduled for the same week as the industry's largest annual conference, a timing that Victoria had orchestrated with military precision. The buzz surrounding our platform had grown to the point where major publications were requesting exclusive interviews, their interest focused not just on our technology, but on the story behind its development. The night before our launch, I stood in our office surrounded by the evidence of collective effort and shared vision. The exposed brick walls now displayed whiteboards covered in complex equations and strategic projections, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city where I'd once thought my professional dreams had died. Everything about this space reflected growth and possibility rather than limitation and betrayal. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, the preview showing just enough text to make my heart race with unexpected emotion. "Maya, I heard about your new company. We need to talk. Alex." I stared at the message for several minutes, feeling the ghost of old pain stirring beneath layers of new confidence and hard-won wisdom. The Maya who had answered his midnight call a year ago would have responded immediately, desperate for any acknowledgement or apology he might offer. But I was no longer that person, transformed by necessity and opportunity into someone who understood her own worth. Instead of responding, I deleted the message and turned my attention back to the launch preparation materials spread across my desk. Tomorrow would bring challenges and opportunities that demanded my full focus. Yesterday's betrayals had already taught me everything they had to offer. The launch event itself exceeded our most optimistic projections, attended by industry leaders whose interest had been piqued by months of carefully orchestrated publicity. Our presentation was flawless, the live demonstration of our platform's capabilities, generating the kind of excitement that transforms companies from startups into serious market players overnight. Jonathan Westfield was in the audience, his presence both expected and strategically significant. He watched our presentation with the focused attention of someone trying to identify threats and opportunities simultaneously, his expression revealing nothing of whatever calculations were running behind his carefully by. Neutral facade. During the networking reception that followed, he approached me with the confident stride of someone accustomed to controlling conversations from their opening moments. "Maya, congratulations on your success. I have to admit, I'm impressed by what you've accomplished in such a short time." His tone carried the casual authority of someone who'd never doubted his ability to influence outcomes through sheer force of will, but I could see uncertainty flickering behind his confident exterior. The power dynamic that had once seemed so fixed and immutable was shifting in real time, our conversation taking place on entirely different ground than any we'd shared in the past. "Thank you, Jonathan. It's amazing what becomes possible when you're working with people who value collaboration over competition." My response was carefully measured, professional, but with undertones that made my meaning clear to anyone listening closely. The conversation that followed was a delicate dance of corporate diplomacy, both of us aware that we were negotiating more than just professional pleasantries. His company was struggling with the implementation challenges that inevitably accompany stolen innovation, while mine was positioned to capitalize on authentic understanding of the underlying technology. "I'd like to discuss potential partnership opportunities," he said eventually, the words clearly costing him more than he wanted to admit. "Your platform could complement our existing client services in ways that might benefit both organizations." The proposal was exactly what Victoria had predicted would emerge from our successful launch: established companies seeking to acquire or partner with us rather than compete directly. The validation was satisfying, but not in the way I'd once imagined it would be. Revenge, I was discovering, was far less sweet than the simple satisfaction of work well done and opportunities earned rather than stolen. "I'll have my business development team reach out to schedule a proper discussion," I replied, maintaining the professional distance that successful negotiations required. Partnership opportunities are always worth exploring when they align with our strategic objectives. The weeks following our launch were a whirlwind of client meetings, media interviews, and strategic planning sessions that felt like boarding a rocket ship just as it achieved escape velocity. Our client base grew exponentially, major corporations implementing our platform with results that exceeded even their optimistic projections. The financial rewards followed quickly, our equity stakes transforming from theoretical possibilities into concrete wealth that changed not just my bank account, but my entire relationship with professional risk and security. The modest salary that had once seemed adequate was now supplemented by quarterly distributions that dwarfed my former corporate compensation. More importantly, the work itself continued to evolve and challenge me in ways that made every day feel like an opportunity for growth rather than merely survival. We were expanding into new markets, developing applications that pushed the boundaries of what predictive analytics could accomplish across industries ranging from healthcare to environmental sustainability. It was during one of these expansion phases that the call came from Victoria's assistant, requesting an urgent meeting that couldn't be conducted over the phone. The tone suggested both opportunity and complication, the kind of development that could reshape everything we'd built or threaten its foundation entirely. Victoria's office reflected her success with understated elegance, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined with volumes on business strategy and behavioral psychology. Her desk positioned to take advantage of panoramic city views that commanded attention without overwhelming the space. She gestured toward the sitting area rather than the formal conference table, suggesting this conversation would be more personal than purely professional. "Jonathan's company is in serious trouble," she began without preamble, her directness cutting through any pretense of casual conversation. "Their implementation of your original algorithm has created cascade failures across multiple client accounts, and they're facing litigation that could destroy them entirely." The news should have generated satisfaction or vindication, but instead, I felt a complex mixture of emotions that defied easy categorization. These were people I'd once worked alongside, colleagues whose professional destruction brought no real joy despite the betrayals that had preceded it. "He's requested a meeting with you directly," Victoria continued, her expression suggesting she'd already formed opinions about the wisdom of such a conversation. "Not through lawyers or business development intermediaries, but a direct discussion about potential solutions to their current crisis." The request carried implications that extended far beyond simple business negotiations, touching on questions of forgiveness, professional ethics, and the kind of person I wanted to become a success gave me choices I'd never possessed before. The easy path would be to ignore his request entirely, allowing market forces to complete the destruction that his own actions had initiated. "What do you think he wants?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. "Salvation," Victoria replied with characteristic bluntness. His company built their recent growth on a foundation they didn't understand, and now that foundation is cracking under the weight of their ambitions. You're the only person who truly understands how to fix what they've broken. The meeting took place in a neutral conference room downtown, the kind of sterile corporate space designed to host difficult conversations without emotional complications. Jonathan arrived precisely on time, his usual confidence replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like humility, his expensive suit unable to disguise the weight of pressure he was carrying. Alex accompanied him, a development that added layers of complexity I hadn't anticipated. He looked older somehow, the easy charm that had once been his most powerful professional asset, dimmed by months of crisis management and declining prospects. The sight of him stirred old emotions, but they felt distant now, like echoes of someone else's experience rather than immediate personal pain. "Maya, thank you for agreeing to meet with us," Jonathan began, his tone carrying none of its former authority. "I want to start by acknowledging that we handled your departure poorly and that the circumstances surrounding your algorithm's implementation were problematic." The admission fell short of a full apology, but represented more accountability than I'd expected from someone whose career had been built on never admitting fault or weakness. Alex remained silent, his expression suggesting internal struggles that went beyond purely professional concerns. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked, maintaining the professional distance that successful negotiations required, despite the personal history that complicated every word. The proposal they outlined was comprehensive and desperate, a licensing agreement that would give them access to our refined platform in exchange for royalties that could prove quite lucrative over time. More significantly, they were offering to publicly acknowledge the original source of their algorithmic foundation, a form of professional vindication that addressed the reputation damage their theft had caused. "We're also prepared to offer Sophia's resignation as part of this agreement," Alex added quietly, his words clearly costing him significant effort. "Her role in the implementation failures has been substantial, and her departure might help restore confidence in our technical capabilities." The personal dimension of his offer created complications I hadn't anticipated, touching on questions of forgiveness and whether professional justice required personal destruction. Sophia had been a willing participant in the theft of my work, but she'd also been operating within systems and incentives that encouraged such behavior. "I need time to consider this proposal with my partners," I replied, the truth being that I needed time to understand my own feelings about revenge, forgiveness, and the kind of professional relationships I wanted to build going forward. The discussion with Victoria and our executive team that followed was intense and multifaceted, touching on strategic considerations, ethical implications, and the long-term consequences of different responses to our former employer's crisis. The unanimous opinion was that we held all the cards and could essentially dictate terms that would be both profitable and protective of our interests. The question, Victoria observed during one particularly heated debate, is whether we want to be known as the company that destroys competitors or the one that demonstrates how business should be conducted ethically, sustainably. Her words crystallized something I'd been struggling to articulate. The recognition that our response to this situation would define not just our immediate financial future, but our long-term reputation and the kind of industry culture we wanted to promote. The counterproposal we developed was more generous than Jonathan had any right to expect, but structured to protect our interests and ensure that future collaborations would operate on genuinely equitable terms. We would license our platform technology in exchange for significant royalties and partial ownership of the implementation projects, giving us both financial return and quality control over how our innovations were applied. More importantly, the agreement included provisions for industry-wide acknowledgement of intellectual property origins and collaborative development practices that could serve as a model for how companies should handle innovation and employee contributions. We were using our leverage not just for personal vindication, but for systemic change that could benefit future generations of professionals. The final negotiations took place over several weeks, lawyers and accountants working through details that would govern our professional relationship for years to come. Throughout the process, I found myself thinking not about revenge or vindication, but about the kind of industry I wanted to help create. One where innovation was rewarded rather than stolen, and where professional relationships were built on mutual respect rather than exploitation. The signing ceremony was held in our office, the exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows providing a backdrop that emphasized growth and possibility rather than corporate formality. Jonathan and his team looked uncomfortable in our unconventional space, their tailored suits and polished shoes standing out against our more casual dress code and collaborative work environment. As I watched Jonathan sign the documents that would save his company while acknowledging my contributions to their foundation, I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness. This moment represented the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, but it also marked the final dissolution of professional relationships that had once meant everything to my sense of identity and purpose. Alex approached me as the formal proceedings concluded, his expression carrying weight that went beyond simple business considerations. "Maya, I want you to know that I understand what I cost you, and not just professionally. I've spent months trying to figure out how to apologize for something that can't really be forgiven." His words carried genuine remorse, but they also highlighted the fundamental difference between us now. I moved beyond needing his apology or acknowledgement, transformed by necessity and opportunity into someone whose validation came from internal sources rather than external recognition. "We were different people then," I replied, the statement feeling both generous and accurate. "I hope you've learned something from this experience that will help you make better choices going forward." The months that followed brought rapid expansion and new challenges that demanded all of my professional attention and creative energy. Our client base grew to include Fortune 500 companies whose implementations of our platform generated case studies that became industry standards for predictive analytics applications. The financial rewards continued to exceed projections, our equity stakes appreciating to levels that transformed my entire relationship with money and professional risk. More importantly, the work itself evolved to include projects that addressed social and environmental challenges, applying our technological capabilities to problems that extended far beyond simple profit maximization. It was during one of these socially focused initiatives that I received an unexpected visitor at our office, Sophia Chen appearing in our reception desk with an appointment request that caught me completely off guard. Her appearance had changed significantly, the polished confidence replaced by something that looked like hard-won humility. Her expensive wardrobe exchanged for more modest professional attire that suggested altered circumstances. The conversation that followed took place in one of our smaller conference rooms, the intimate space creating an atmosphere that encouraged honesty rather than corporate diplomacy. Sophia's request was straightforward and surprising. She wanted to work for our company, not in a senior role, but as a junior analyst willing to learn our methods and contribute to our mission. "I know I have no right to ask for this opportunity," she began, her tone carrying none of its former authority. "What I did was wrong, and I've spent the last 6 months understanding exactly how wrong it was. But I've also learned that your approach to analytics and business ethics represents everything I want my career to become." Her admission of fault was more complete than I'd received from either Jonathan or Alex, acknowledging not just the theft of my work, but the personal betrayal that had accompanied it. More significantly, she seemed to understand that seeking forgiveness required more than words. It demanded concrete actions that demonstrated genuine change. The decision to hire her was controversial among our team, many of whom viewed it as either naive generosity or strategic mistake that could compromise our competitive position. Victoria was particularly skeptical, questioning whether someone who demonstrated such poor judgment and ethical flexibility could ever be truly trusted with sensitive information. "People can change," I argued during one particularly heated team discussion. "And our company culture is strong enough to guide that change in positive directions. Besides, she understands our technology better than most external candidates, and her mistakes have taught her lessons that could benefit our entire organization." The probationary employment we offered Sophia was structured to address legitimate concerns while providing genuine opportunity for professional redemption. Her access to sensitive information was limited initially, her projects carefully supervised, and her performance evaluated using metrics that emphasized both technical competence and ethical decision proli. making. To her credit, Sophia embraced these constraints without complaint, approaching her reduced status with humility that seemed genuine rather than performed for strategic advantage. Her work was competent and increasingly creative. Her contributions to team discussions thoughtful and oriented toward collective success rather than personal advancement. The transformation was gradual but undeniable. Her integration into our collaborative culture, providing a case study in how professional environments can shape individual behavior when organizational values are clearly defined and consistently tabby. Reinforced. More surprisingly, her presence enhanced rather than undermined our team dynamics, her hard-won insights into implementation failures providing valuable perspective on potential pitfalls. As our second anniversary approached, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me from corporate betrayal to entrepreneurial success. From personal devastation to professional fulfillment that exceeded my most ambitious original dreams. The algorithm that had once been stolen from me had evolved into something far more comprehensive and impactful, its applications extending into areas I'd never imagined when I first conceived its basic principles. The industry recognition that followed our continued success was gratifying, but not in the way I'd once expected it would be. Awards and accolades felt less important than the knowledge that our work was making genuine differences in how businesses understood and served their customers, our platform enabling more ethical and effective approaches to market engagement. The personal relationships that had been destroyed by betrayal had been replaced by professional partnerships built on mutual respect and shared commitment to excellence. Victoria had become a mentor whose wisdom extended far beyond simple business strategy, her guidance helping me navigate challenges that extended from technical innovation to organizational leadership. Dr. Marcus Kim had evolved from colleague to close friend, our intellectual collaboration producing innovations that neither of us could have achieved independently. The rest of our team represented a carefully curated collection of professionals who'd been attracted by our mission and retained by our culture. Their diverse backgrounds and perspectives creating a creative environment that felt more like family than traditional workplace. Even my relationship with Sophia had developed into something resembling friendship, her journey from antagonist to ally providing both of us with insights into forgiveness, professional growth, and the possibility of redemption when it's pursued with genuine commitment rather than strategic calculation. The final chapter of this story began with another unexpected phone call. This one from an investment banker whose client wanted to acquire our company for an amount that would transform us all from successful entrepreneurs into genuinely wealthy individuals. The offer was substantial enough to fund any future project we might imagine, providing financial security that would make professional risk-taking a choice rather than necessity. The team meeting to discuss this possibility was unlike any we'd held before, the conversation touching on questions of legacy, purpose, and what we wanted our professional lives to represent beyond simple financial buzz. Accumulation. The easy decision would be to accept the offer and retire early, using our wealth to pursue personal interests, rather than continued business challenges. "We've built something special here," Victoria observed during one particularly reflective discussion. "Something that extends beyond just financial success into cultural impact and social value. The question is whether that something can survive and thrive under different ownership, or whether selling would essentially destroy what we've created. Us." Her words crystallized the central dilemma facing anyone who builds something meaningful. The tension between personal financial benefit and broader mission fulfillment, between cashing out and continuing to build, between individual success and collective impact. The decision we reached was characteristically unconventional, structured to address both financial opportunity and mission preservation in ways that traditional business models rarely accommodate. We would sell a majority stake to the acquiring company while retaining operational control and cultural decision-making authority, using the influx of capital to expand our impact while protecting the micro values that had made expansion possible. The negotiation process was complex and occasionally contentious, requiring careful balance between investor expectations and organizational integrity. Throughout these discussions, I found myself drawing on lessons learned from betrayal and redemption, understanding how to protect what mattered most while remaining open to opportunities that could amplify our positive topper impact. The final agreement represented a new model for how innovative companies could scale without losing their essential character, preserving entrepreneurial culture while accessing resources that could accelerate mission fulfillment. More personally, it represented the culmination of a journey that had begun with professional devastation and evolved into something far more meaningful than simple revenge or financial success. As I signed the documents that would secure our company's future while rewarding everyone who'd contributed to its development, I thought about the water stain on my apartment ceiling that had once looked like a question mark. The questions it had posed during my darkest moments had all been answered, not through revenge or vindication, but through the patient work of building something better than what had been destroyed. The celebration that evening took place on the rooftop terrace of our office building, the city lights stretching out below us like a map of possibilities yet to be explored. Our entire team was present, along with partners and investors whose support had made this moment possible. The atmosphere was festive but also reflective, everyone understanding that we were marking not just financial success, but the completion of a transformation that had touched all of our lives. Alex appeared unexpectedly during the celebration, his presence causing a momentary stir among team members who knew our history. He looked different again, more settled somehow, as if the intervening months had taught him lessons that went beyond simple professional survival. His approach was careful and respectful, acknowledging the social dynamics that his presence created. "Maya, I wanted to congratulate you in person," he said, his tone carrying none of its former presumption. "What you've built here is remarkable, and I'm glad I could witness at least part of your success." The conversation that followed was brief but meaningful, touching on growth, forgiveness, and the different paths our lives had taken since that midnight phone call that had ended our relationship. He'd learned from his mistakes in ways that seemed genuine rather than performed, his current role at a smaller company apparently providing opportunities for the kind of collaborative leadership that our previous workplace had never encouraged. "I hope you found what you were looking for," I told him as our conversation concluded, the statement carrying warmth that surprised both of us. "I think I'm finally learning what that is," he replied, his smile carrying self-awareness that had been absent during our time together. The months that followed our acquisition brought new challenges and opportunities that tested everything we'd built, while providing resources to expand our impact in ways we'd only dreamed of previously. Our platform was integrated into larger systems that served millions of users. Our analytical capabilities applied to problems ranging from healthcare optimization to environmental sustainability. The work remained intellectually stimulating and socially meaningful, but it also provided financial security that transformed my entire relationship with professional risk and personal planning. The modest apartment with its question mark water stain was replaced by a home that reflected both success and values, its design emphasizing sustainability and community engagement rather than simple luxury display. More importantly, the relationships built through shared struggle and collaborative success had evolved into a professional network that felt more like chosen family than traditional business connections. Victoria continued to serve as both mentor and friend, her guidance helping me navigate new challenges while maintaining the values that had made success possible in the first place. The industry impact of our work became increasingly visible as other companies adopted similar approaches to innovation and employee relations, our model serving as proof that ethical business practices could produce superior results compared to the exploitation and theft that had once seemed inevitable in competitive markets. Professional conferences featured case studies of our development process, highlighting how collaborative culture and respect for intellectual property had enabled innovations that benefit entire industries. Sophia's transformation became one of the most compelling aspects of our story. Her journey from corporate antagonist to trusted colleague, providing evidence that people could genuinely change when placed in environments that rewarded growth rather than punished vulnerability. Her contributions to our platform development had become increasingly valuable, her insights into implementation challenges helping us avoid pitfalls that might have compromised our expansion efforts. The personal satisfaction that came from this success was different from anything I'd expected during those dark months of unemployment and betrayal. Rather than simple vindication or revenge, I'd discovered the deeper fulfillment that comes from building something meaningful with people who share your values and commitment to excellence. The final irony of this story revealed itself during our 3rd anniversary celebration when Jonathan Westfield approached me with an unexpected proposal. His company had stabilized and even begun growing again, their implementation of our licensed technology producing results that exceeded their most optimistic projections. More significantly, their internal culture had evolved to emphasize collaboration and ethical innovation, changes that he credited to lessons learned from their near destruction. "I want to offer you something," he said during a quiet moment away from the main celebration. "The position of Chief Innovation Officer at our company. With equity participation and full authority over technology development, it would be a chance to apply your platform at enterprise scale while maintaining the collaborative culture you've built here." The offer was generous and professionally intriguing, representing an opportunity to influence industry practices at a scale that even our successful startup couldn't match. It would also complete a circle of sorts, returning me to the corporate environment where my journey had begun but with authority and respect that had been absent during my first experience there. "I'm honored by the offer," I replied carefully. "But I think my place is here, continuing to build what we've started and exploring new applications for our technology. However, I'd be interested in discussing partnership opportunities that could benefit both organizations. End. The conversation that followed outlined possibilities for collaboration that could amplify both companies' impacts while preserving the independence and culture that had made our success possible. These partnerships would focus on joint research initiatives and shared implementation projects, combining enterprise resources with startup innovation in ways that could accelerate positive change across entire industries. As the evening concluded and our guests departed, I found myself alone on the rooftop terrace, looking out over the city that had witnessed both my professional destruction and resurrection. The lights below represented millions of individual stories, dreams pursued and abandoned, successes celebrated, and failures mourned. The full spectrum of human ambition and resilience playing out in countless variations. The journey from betrayal to triumph had taught me lessons that extended far beyond simple business strategy or professional survival. I'd learned that success built on stolen foundations inevitably crumbles, while achievements earned through collaboration and ethical practice create lasting value for everyone involved. More importantly, I'd discovered that the best revenge against those who underestimate or betray you isn't destruction but demonstration, proving through your actions that their judgment was fundamentally flawed. The algorithm that had once been stolen from me had evolved into something far more comprehensive and impactful than its original form, its applications extending into areas I'd never imagined when I first conceived its basic principles. But the real innovation hadn't been technological. It had been cultural, proving that businesses could succeed by prioritizing collaboration over competition, growth over exploitation, and long-term impact over short-term profits. As I finally prepared to leave the office that night, I paused at my desk to review the latest quarterly reports that documented our continued growth and expanding influence. The numbers were impressive, but what struck me most was the section devoted to employee satisfaction and retention rates. Metrics that reflected the kind of workplace culture I'd dreamed of finding but had never encountered until we built it ourselves. The drive home took me through neighborhoods that had once seemed impossibly distant during my months of unemployment and uncertainty. Now they felt familiar and welcoming, part of a city that had provided both the setting for my professional destruction and the foundation for rebuilding something better than what had been lost. My new home welcomed me with warmth that went beyond simple comfort, its spaces designed to accommodate both solitude and collaboration, work and relaxation. the full spectrum of a life that had achieved balance between professional achievement and personal fulfillment. The water stain question mark had been replaced by artwork that celebrated growth and possibility, visual reminders of lessons learned and distances traveled. The final chapter of this story would be written in the years to come. Through continued innovation and expanding impact, through relationships nurtured and challenges overcome, through the daily choice to build rather than destroy, to collaborate rather than compete, to lift others up rather than tear burr them down. But the foundation had been laid, solid and ethical and sustainable, ready to support whatever dreams and ambitions the future might bring. Looking back on the journey from that midnight phone call to this moment of stability and success, I understood that the greatest victory hadn't been financial or professional, but personal. I'd discovered who I really was when everything familiar was stripped away, found strength I didn't know I possessed when comfort and security disappeared, and learned that the most meaningful success comes not from defeating others, but from becoming the best version of yourself. The betrayal that had once seemed like the end of everything had actually been the beginning of something far better, a catalyst for growth and transformation that wouldn't have been possible within the constraints of my former life. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened, forcing you to discover capabilities and possibilities that comfortable stability would never have revealed. As I settled into my home office to review the next day's priorities, I smiled at the irony of how completely my life had changed while remaining fundamentally consistent with my deepest values and aspirations. The work was different, the relationships were different, the financial situation was certainly different, but the core commitment to innovation, collaboration, and ethical practice had remained constant throughout every datini. Transformation. The phone beside my desk remained silent, no longer a source of anxiety or unwelcome surprises, but simply a tool for maintaining the connections that made meaningful work possible. The midnight calls that had once brought devastating news had been replaced by regular conversations with colleagues and partners who shared my commitment to building something worthwhile together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, new problems to solve, and innovations to develop, new relationships to nurture and expand. But tonight, I was content to sit in the quiet satisfaction of work well done and a life rebuilt on foundations that could support whenever the future might bring. The story that had begun with theft and betrayal had evolved into something far more complex and ultimately more satisfying than simple revenge could ever have provided. Instead of destroying those who had wronged me, I'd built something that made their actions irrelevant, created value that transcended their capacity for destruction, and discovered that the best response to being underestimated is simply to prove the underestimators wrong through sustained excellence and unwavering integrity. The greatest irony of all was that the algorithm they'd stolen had been just the beginning, a small piece of something much larger that they could never have understood or properly implemented because they'd acquired it through theft rather than development. What we'd built since then dwarfed that original innovation, representing not just technological advancement, but cultural evolution that could influence how entire industries approached innovation. Collaboration. As I finally turned off the lights and prepared for sleep, I reflected on how completely my definition of success had evolved through this experience. The promotion I'd once wanted so desperately seemed trivial compared to the opportunity to build something from nothing, to create rather than simply climb, to lead rather than simply follow orders from people whose vision was limited by their own ethical constraints. The water stain question mark had been answered definitively. I was capable of far more than I'd ever imagined, strong enough to survive complete professional destruction, and creative enough to rebuild something better than what L-teen had been lost. The questions it had posed during my darkest moments had all been resolved through patient work and unwavering commitment to values that had guided me through every transformation. The future stretched ahead like an unwritten story, full of possibilities that would be shaped by choices yet to be made and relationships yet to be formed. But the foundation was solid now. built on authentic achievement rather than stolen innovation, supported by colleagues who shared my values rather than exploited my trust, oriented toward creating value rather than simply accumulating wealth. The journey from betrayal to triumph had taught me that success isn't about defeating your enemies, but about making them irrelevant, not about proving others wrong, but about proving yourself right, not about revenge, but about building something so much better that the original injury becomes merely the first step in a transformation that benefits everyone involved. As sleep finally came, I smiled at the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to apply these lessons, to continue building on foundations that had been tested and proven strong, to work with people who shared my commitment to excellence and integrity, to create value that would outlast any temporary setbacks or personal betrayals. The algorithm that had started this entire journey continued to evolve and find new applications, but it was no longer the most important thing I'd created. That honor belonged to the company culture that had enabled innovation, the relationships that had sustained me through difficulty, and the proof that ethical business practices could produce superior results compared to the exploitation and theft that had once seemed inevitable in competitive markets. The story was complete now, not because the work was finished, but because the transformation was irreversible. The lessons were learned, and the foundation was laid for whatever chapters would follow. The girl who had once been devastated by midnight phone calls and corporate betrayal had become a woman who could shape industries and influence cultures, who could build rather than simply survive, who could lead rather than simply endure. The water stain question mark had been answered. I was exactly who I was supposed to become, shaped by adversity into someone capable of creating rather than simply consuming, of building rather than simply climbing, of leading rather than simply following. The rest would be determined by choices yet to be made. But the capacity to make them well had been established through trials that had seemed devastating at the time, but had ultimately proven to be exactly the catalyst needed for growth that wouldn't have been possible any other way.